when you look at classic ERP, it's the domain of the super user. And the super user can feel a little bit threatened when these kind of technologies are rolled out that essentially make it a lot easier for those that haven't lived and breathed in these systems for 10 or 20 years to start doing things and start getting information and start asking good questions. That can be disruptive.
Growing a business requires a holistic approach that extends beyond sales and marketing. This approach needs alignment among people, processes, and technologies. So if you're a business owner, operations, or finance leader looking to learn growth strategies from your peers and competitors, you're tuned into the right podcast. Welcome to the WBS Podcast, where scalable growth using business systems is our #1 priority. Now, here is your host, Sam Gupta.
Hello and welcome to Analysts Gone Wild. We're analyzing enterprise software stories. I'm Robert Kramer with more insights and strategy. This is episode 6. I'm joined by a great crew of people here. Sam Gupta, John Reed, Michael Fawcett, and Shashib Shashi. Is that how you say it? But welcome, gentlemen. How are we doing today?
Good. Great.
We're good. We got some great stories. There's so much going on with enterprise software around the world, and mergers and partnerships are obviously the same. And companies either build, buy, or they are going down different roads to actually benefit the customer. But why don't we introduce the crew here? Why don't we kind of go around in a circle here? Start with Sam, and then we'll go to John and Michael and Shashib.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much, Robert. Sam Gupta, principal at Elevate IQ, 20 years in the space, covering enterprise software. Over to you, John.
Yeah, John Reed, Diginomica. We've been around for about 11 years now, looking at real-world transformation. Hope I don't get into too much trouble today. I get really impatient with vendor news announcements, so we'll see.
Michael Fawcett. I'm the CEO and chief analyst of Arion Research, which has been around now for 3.5 years. I'm an ex-enterprise software guy, worked at IDC running their enterprise apps business, and was the chief research officer at G2 for 5 years. I tend to focus mostly on CX, AI, and enterprise apps in general.
Okay. Shashi?
Cool. I'm Shashi Belamkonda. I work for the Infotech Research Group. Unlike the OGs on this call, I'm relatively new to the analyst space, but I've had about 20 years in technology marketing with companies of different sizes. So hope to provide a little bit of the color from the audience for this discussion today.
Well, all personalities are different, so that makes us, better. So why don't we jump into the first one, Sam?
Yeah, let me bring in just 1 second. So, all right.
Okay. Well, this is an interesting one because I think that the data space is expanding. Like I said, you build, you buy, you partner. And one of the things is, like SAP and Databricks and Cloudera and Snowflake, these companies are partnering to make a better, data model for the customer. So, Qlik is purchasing Upsolver, which is a specialty in Apache Iceberg. So it's one of the things that they're trying to be more flexible for their customers so they can actually be more open to work with the companies that I previously mentioned. But what do we all think about this?
I mean, the movement of data quality, all these different tools that we've seen certainly exploding on the scene. Why? Because lots of companies are experimenting with AI and generative AI and agentic AI. So, data's top of mind for a lot of companies. And one of the things I really liked about this is adding in more real-time capabilities, which is going to get to be more and more important as more companies do POCs and move into production with agentic AI, where they're taking, some action, some autonomous action, and you need that real-time data to help back that up.
Does it benefit more to companies that work with Cloudera or Snowflake or Databricks, or what do we all think about that, or none of the above?
I think it's all of the above in a way. I think just from my viewpoint, we're going so fast to real time, right? Like, and there's a lot of pressure from the business on like, don't make this data lake be some foggy thing that nobody knows where it is, and I need like 10 analysts to bring the data back. All of these, in my opinion, will help the business make decisions quickly.
Yeah.
So I think a couple of things about this when I ask myself like, why should I care about this? And I think one of the reasons obviously is that to get a result out of enterprise AI, you really do have to have a better data conversation than we've ever had before. And I think Qlik has been doing this for a while, because I was a pretty big advocate of what Talent was doing. When Qlik acquired Talent, it told me that they wanted to really solve a lot of plumbing problems and not just a business user data problem. And so I think we can follow them along this path here and understand this announcement in that context. I will say that this announcement with the open data lakehouse of verbiage got me Googling last night on this term to try to better understand what an open data lakehouse was, and why that supposedly provides value over a data warehouse or a data lake or all of that other stuff. And I think this is the kind of terminology that I think can be challenging for customers to figure out, like, what the hell does this mean? Why is this better than these other words that I was using before? But the bottom line, I think, if you read between the sort of buzzword bingo, is that this is about basically helping customers to sort of get the best of both worlds, right? So some of the more robust data controls and things, but also better performance. So basically, you're trying to get the best of all worlds. Whether you can actually, do that remains to be seen. One of the things I was looking into around this format is sometimes it's not as good when you're trying to protect private data and things like that. It's not as good at sort of role-based security defined data structures. So customers need to probe on that before they dive into these things.
Well, don't you think they have to go, sorry, don't you think they have to go backwards and get their data management set up so they can actually exercise things like this and not have siloed locations where it's consistent?
I mean, the whole data pipeline, right? I mean, that is in fact being looked at across a lot of businesses. And you're right. If you got to solve the, how do I get it there? How do I put it together? How do I get it into the right place? All those other questions, and companies are definitely, looking at solutions and struggling some with it as well.
Yeah. Shashi, sir.
So I wanted to say something that John brought up, and John's articles are really good in translating geek to English. So if you read some of it,
absolutely.
I think there is a big problem with PR firms when they put on this thing. They just ask the technical guys, "Hey, tell us what this does," instead of saying, "Explain to me so that I understand what this does," and then translate it. I was also wondering about all the terms that are in this. Like, I actually want to ask, like, how many acronyms does a person need to know before they read a press release from a technology company?
Yeah, we are really good at reassembling words in new ways.
So guys, so I'm actually going to take slightly step back on this, and I don't know, I'm pretty sure you guys are going to have a little bit more insights here. So overarchingly speaking, from the market perspective, so there are three layers here, right? Number one is the BI market, and we have some of these stories that we have covered from the BI perspective. I think we have today as well. The second is data warehouse market that you have already mentioned. And the third is sort of the data integration market. There is a substantial overlap in these markets, but they are sort of distinct as well. So in this particular case, and overall, I guess if you ask any of the BI vendors, they all are saying that, what is that? BI is the new AI, or AI is the new BI, whatever, however that goes. But I mean, they are talking about, BI is supposed to be the new AI. So now in this particular case, what do you guys think where the market is going from the data warehouse perspective? Is there going to be a play for the data integration vendor? Because some of the players in the market, they are sort of killing that, right? So what do you guys think of that?
I mean, you are seeing a race to release, new automation tools across the entire data pipeline, right? I mean, just on a NetApp briefing yesterday, I know Informatica has a couple new announcements coming. I mean, it's all across, and there's a lot of startups rushing towards different pieces in that stack as well. So we're still kind of early and evolving as more and more companies get involved in this discussion around AI and how do I make the data work.
I think what's frustrating for customers is that they really, I think they kind of want to just dive into AI and have AI sort of solve the problem of data quality and data preparation as well. Yeah. And what we're seeing is that that's just not the case, and that there's a lot of reasons why data quality remains elusive. And one of those big ones is that domain experts in different areas are the ones that understand the data best, and there's no way you can automate data cleansing without involving a human element at certain points. But having said that, we are making some progress in this whole overall sort of making things easier. But one of the big questions is, how much do you want to move your data around in the first place? Yeah. And correct. If AI is going to be delivering a lot of the analytical investment by engaging with the AI system to quote unquote generate insights, then why do we need to move the data all over the place in the first place? And so I think part of the problem here is there's a bit of a reset on what we're, that you alluded to, I think, Sam, on what we're trying to do here. And one thing we do know is that it's hard to retrain AI systems, and it's expensive. And so there's architectural techniques to combine current data with the data the AI has been trained on. And so it's really important right now in this real-time context to make sure when I'm asking the AI a question, it is pulling in the most current information from my business. And that's why you're seeing such an emphasis on this real-time question. But still, we haven't dealt with all the costs of maintaining all data in real time, and that's not viable for most customers. So I'm still much more likely to use the phrase right time to talk about data, even in an AI context. But I understand why people want to talk about real-time data and AI. It's about feeding the system what it needs to know at that point of inference, as if you want to throw out a buzzword and sound cool. Right? We talk about inference time now. We sound really important when we do that.
That's good. I like it.
But that's just why I think I like the SAP Databricks partnership, because I think you're going to see this happen a little bit more with ERP companies, because like what you said, John, that you want to keep it maintained in-house and not have the data be leaving different warehouses or data areas, data lakes, or because I feel like the ERP is a data lake, and the business data cloud that SAP developed with integration with Databricks is going to be a trend, like you said, Sam. What's the trend? And I see that happening. So just go back. If you're a manufacturer, do you want to have all these different sources, or do you like the Databricks SAP type of story? So I think that's ahead of the curve right now, and I think that's the trend.
Well, and you're starting to see more and more capabilities to deal with federated data too, right? I mean, Salesforce Data Cloud, you don't have to move data to be able to use data. And I think that's an important part of this trend too. I can leave it where it's most useful and effective and point of collection, or maybe it's edge IoT data, whatever, and yet at the same time still use that in the AI in the ways that I need to, without having to move everything around.
Yeah. So Robert, I would be careful in putting the external data to ERP. That never goes well in general because of the data tightness, to be completely honest. So you still have a place for some sort of data warehouse, data lake. And that's why, the whole SAP story, the only reason why they are going for Databricks is because ERP may not be the smartest idea to put all of this data there. Correct. But the legacy data warehouse play is going away, because now with Databricks, I guess the whole premise is that you don't have to move data. So now do you need the integration play? And that's why I'm questioning the story. Yeah.
Well, I don't know if it's the reason why it's good, though, is because it gives the users access to SAP data like you said, outside of SAP, and then unstructured and structured data to be combined. So that is the play that I'm thinking is a good one, where it puts the data in more of a one spot or multiple spots that you can access, versus having a larger technology stack. So I think we can debate it, but I think that you have a very good point, though.
So just real quick, just a very quick comment in terms of looking ahead and trying to understand all this like flood of releases, because there's going to be 100 more announcements like this in the next 2 weeks we're not going to be able to get to. The structured and unstructured thing is really the key, because the kind of AI engagement that we're going to be looking for really needs both, and that's actually poses a lot of interesting architectural challenges, because AI systems, ironically enough, are a lot better with the unstructured data. Look, it was trained on the internet. The internet's not exactly structured data source, right? But companies like SAP, for example, are making progress on what you might call tabular data via knowledge graph input and things like that. And so one thing for customers to monitor here is the role of that. So you look at the unstructured enterprise data, which is all the conversations we're having on Teams and email and all of that stuff. But then also think about the third-party unstructured data that really factors into the decisions we want to make. And depending on depending on industry, that could have to do with weather patterns. It could have to do with retail trends, all kinds of demographic things that are going on, global instability in supply chains. When an executive asks the quote-unquote AI, they want all of that in there, because otherwise they're not getting the full picture, and it's not really living up to its promise.
Yeah. That's probably a great segue to the next one, Sam, where we talk a little bit about what Epicor is doing on the front of supply chain and AI agents. And, obviously supply chain is a gigantic component of, companies that need to cut costs or to have better, logistics and monitoring and control of their supply chain, which is a huge thing. But in order to have this working correctly, you need the data to be correct. So, this is a pretty good example of what's going on out there for ERP companies and SCM. But what do you all think about this move? I don't think it's anything new, because I think all the ERP vendors are looking to do the same thing here.
Yeah, it's one of the places that there are real obvious use cases, and particularly, the further you get out from the headquarters into the field, right? You've got people that can use conversational interfaces and, need to get data in a really quick method that's very focused on what they're trying to do. Where's this item? How do I ship this? Do I have it in inventory? Is it in the store? All these things, right? It's just really useful. I know one of the clients I've worked with, an IoT company, that's actually one of the biggest use cases is just out on the warehouse floor on the mobile device, right? Can I use this to have access to quickly find data that I need to answer questions that I wouldn't have easily been able to do without going and looking for a terminal and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's a big topic as well. John and Shashi, what do you guys think about this? And Sam?
I think everything now comes to how quickly can you get the data in the user's hands, right? And especially in supply chain management. I think the reason why we are seeing so many things, so many announcements about this is people suddenly realize there's no AI without good and fast access to real-time data. So now everybody is scrambling to say like, oops, we can't give you what you need till we do something else with all the data that we have. That's my opinion on why we are going to see more of these coming out. John?
So we have more buzzword bingo with vertical AI agents.
Oh, come on, I like that one.
So horizontal AI agents aren't good enough, obviously.
No.
But I do think what Epicor I think wants to get across here, and I'll give them some credit for this, is they want us to think about how AI agents are going to work for example, in a supply chain context, which is most of what their customer focus is. And in fact, there is a role for AI agents in that context. And so that's sort of what, if you peel back the buzzword, that's sort of what they're trying to get across. And, look, every ERP vendor is going to have some version of this. And when I dig into evaluating these things, I need to understand a lot in terms of how customers are adopting it, how use cases are designed, and also what the architecture looks like on the back end. Because the thing is that while we talk up agents, we have to be a little bit careful, because when we're usually referring to LLM-driven agents, and those are probabilistic. Those are not deterministic, and that's really important in terms of how autonomous they can be within a supply chain system. There's certain kinds of supply chain jobs that I absolutely would not give today's agent. But in the Epicor press release, I thought they did a really good job of articulating, where agents can help. They talked about everything from code assistance to conversational ERP, to logistics insights, to automating some supplier communications. So it looks to me like they've given some real thought to how to embed this into realistic use cases without the overreach, because we do need to establish some level of trust before we allow these agents to run our transactional business for us. So I think they did a pretty good job with that, but now we have to see, how this plays out in the real world.
Isn't there something that they're all missing though to set this up to work? Like, we need processes, we need change management, we need data management, because there's this whole thing looming out there that you're just going to walk in and be able to have these AI agents be successful. And there's a huge human overseeing this whole capacity of AI agents to actually be successful as well. So don't you think there needs to be a bridge that's built to actually show the customers their way, or just assumed?
Yeah, I mean, they didn't talk about that in the press release, but if you look at other vendors that are going down that path, I mean, Salesforce with Trailblazer, they have all, a bunch of different courses they've rolled out to help customers get there. And a lot of that's implementation and change management. And I didn't see it in this press release, but it is. And so hopefully they're, backing that up with assets as well.
So I think, Robert, you're making a really key point, because when you look at classic ERP, it's the domain of the super user. And the super user can feel a little bit threatened when these kind of technologies are rolled out that essentially make it a lot easier for those that haven't lived and breathed in these systems for 10 or 20 years to start doing things and start getting information and start asking good questions. That can be disruptive. And so I would agree with you. I think vendors need a lot of talking points around how this technology should be adopted. And I've gotten some pushback on vendors around this in terms of like how they don't want to get too involved in telling companies what to do with these technologies. But I have pointed out, that you're handing very powerful, potent technologies to customers that can be actually misused in ways that are not helpful and not empowering to employees. And you need to start thinking about that. Now, that I understand why the team of lawyers is telling them, like, don't assume responsibility for your customers' problems. But I think there's a middle ground, and Michael's right. Part of the middle ground is education. Part of the middle ground is elevating the customers that are making progress and are early adopters and helping basically share their stories and break down how they got there, because that's always the missing piece, right? Like these high-performing customers, there's a reason why they're high-performing customers, and the rest of the customer base needs to learn from those stories. And so, Robert, there's a real art to that, and I believe that's part of the whole process, is you have to embrace that.
Yeah, I real quick, and then turn over to Sam and others. But I'd met a manufacturing company that does manufacturing as a service at NetSuite's recent event, and I asked why you're so successful on NetSuite. He said, we completely overinvested in implementation. I go, how did you know to do that? And he said, because we knew and to take advantage of this technology for us to handle all the different facets of NetSuite, from all the way from the IoT to the supply chain to the manufacturing and all the quality control, et cetera. We needed to understand how to use it and overinvest and make sure our data is correct. I don't think a lot of companies see it from that direction, and I think it's imperative that they do somehow. The vendors point this out, because I think the vendors are a little lax on pointing out why they need to do this up front, and then when it's too late, it's hard to go back.
Yeah. So, guys, I would like to add one thing here. So overall, I guess, from Epicor's perspective, and talking about the entire ERP market, I guess, I personally, and I don't know whether you guys have seen the demo of this technology or not. Press releases are press releases. You can only do so much in that. But if you look at the demo, okay, I think Epicor is the company that has done really good job in communicating the value of generative AI. So if you look at the way, and that will answer a lot of questions, John, for you, I guess, from the architecture perspective, the way this is working, I guess, from the demo perspective, and I don't know whether that is a real world or not. Sometimes, demos are demos as well. But in that, the users are able to interact. They don't have to remember these screens. The screen says is coming right in a sort of the Prism, I guess, and then they are able to input the command and then go back. So the whole, the change management piece that you were talking about, Robert, the training piece, I think that is going to be simplified. That is going to be much easier for the users. So yes, the vendors are not necessarily talking about the change management as well as the implementation piece, but in my mind, that is slightly external. When vendors don't talk about their own technology, don't describe enough so that we can drive or conclude in terms of what needs to be done from the implementation perspective, then I feel there's a real gap. But in this particular case, I think they have done a good job with the demo, and I don't know when other vendors are catching up, but there's a real power here in terms of what they have done with this.
Well, I think they could maybe highlight that a little more, because you told us it was a cool demo. I spent 15 minutes looking for it and couldn't find it.
Yeah, me too.
so that's great that you saw it. But the one thing I would say though is I would really need to sit down with the customer and see them be impressed with the demo, because the thing is that I've interacted with enough of these systems now that I know what they're supposed to feel like from an engagement standpoint. But what I would want to see is the customer saying, wow, yeah, this is actually my data and my questions are getting answered properly with this, because this all comes down to how a customer's data is being incorporated into these questions in a way that works for them. I'd love to be at an Epicor user event, for example, and hit that show floor and see customer reactions to this, because like you said, Sam, all the ingredients are there for this to be valuable. Of course, the cost aspect is another thing you have to consider. But every vendor is grappling with cost and value and results and how this fits into their licensing. So,
yep, not anymore. Rob?
Any other questions or thoughts? Shashib, anything you want to add before we go to the next one? I think it's a great topic, and there's a lot going on here. Okay, let's do the next one. Thanks, Sam.
Okay.
So the next one deals with Apple. So, Apple is obviously always in the news, and, they join a consortium of a bunch of different companies. And I guess that at the end of the day, goes back to what we talked about the last couple of slides about AI and how AI continues to develop. And the partnering, I believe it's not with NVIDIA, but it's with Intel, AMD, Google, AWS, right, Microsoft, and Meta, because there's a competing chip that NVIDIA has. But I think this is probably apropos for what's going on and how technology is developing. But what do we all think about this?
I'll take the novice view. From what I can read, is it's all about standardization, right?
Yeah.
It looks like NVIDIA has its proprietary link between the chips, and that puts a lot of power in NVIDIA's hands. So all the other guys want to say, hey, let's set up a new standard. It'll be like the Lightning cable versus USB-C. At the end of the day, I think 2-3 years from now, we'll find everybody following one standard. But till then, probably NVIDIA has a lot of power. And all the other big guys are on the other side, it seems, even though they're using NVIDIA standard too.
Right.
Yeah. And I mean, it's important to focus around the energy consumption piece and how do you make this more efficient, more effective too. So I think there's definitely good message and good, opportunity in that to get this group together. But you're right, we start to see there's a hard way to standardize when you've got more than one standard already. So it can, it'll be complicated for a while, I guess.
So look, the history of enterprise software is about never having an open standard that everyone agrees to.
Uh-huh.
That's all.
That is a standard.
That's the standard, right? Yes, that is the standard. But I have to say, the Register's not my go-to place for tech news, but they are great sometimes with these absurd things. And this goes back to the fact that this consortium was originally established about a year ago in October. The news here is that Apple has joined this consortium. Yeah. But the Register had this fantastic headline last October when this came out. no NVIDIA's networking club convenes in search of open GPU interconnect. I love that. The no NVIDIA club. And down the line, and so it did ask the question, like, why exclude NVIDIA and stuff like that? And, there was a great quote in here from NVIDIA CEO Jensen, who never shies away from such things. He dismissed UA Link, which is the name of this group, as a threat, saying by the time the first gen of UA Link comes out, we will be at NV Link 7 or 8. So those are fighting words, but in general, like, let's bring the cost down, right? I mean, that's the big story of AI in the last couple of months, is that can we bring these infrastructure costs down? That's better for the environment. That's better for companies. That's better for everyone. And, hopefully these kinds of things will make that happen.
Yeah.
So I'm actually going to have a question for you guys, and I don't know, what is going to happen to the data center market. I don't know how that is going to change based on this story. Do you guys have any insights there by any chance?
Also, I'm not sure on that one, because I do think that that's going to change the market a little bit. How do you think this also affects I think it's a parallel to what you said, Sam, quantum computing? Is this group going to get involved in that at all? I know we have a couple of slides coming up on that post this one, but do you think because Microsoft just released their new chip with quantum computing and Microsoft's part of this, how this all delves into the quantum?
I mean, I'm not sure. I couldn't tell from this that there was any linkage there. I mean, certainly, I guess could potentially do that, but I mean, I think the focus around the standard and acceleration and making it more efficient, as John said, making the resources more constrained and manageable. That seems like the point here, but it is interesting to see how quantum starts to come more and more into our conversation. And I know we're going to get to that topic in a little bit, but.
Because Sam, what do you think? Because it's going to affect the data centers. That's why I brought it up. Because there has to be a way to work our way backwards from what everybody these companies want to be with AI and quantum in the data centers.
Yeah. So as far as what I've tracked, I guess Google is probably the only company right now which is talking about quantum, unless they are going to be in some sort of R&D phase. And they have mentioned that. I mean, that's an aggressive timeline. I think they have mentioned that within 3 to 5 years, there's going to be a commercial PC that is going to be quantum enabled. I don't believe so. I think John may have more insights there, I guess. And I don't know if any other companies are going to do that. Obviously, there is tremendous amount of research that is happening, but I don't know what is happening with the funding situation right now in the US. And if they are going to have funding, there is a possibility they might, but you never know.
I get a little frustrated with quantum computing, because it feels like sometimes by the time we're done, we're going to have a blockchain-enabled AI running on a quantum computer in the metaverse, and then people will finally be happy. And look, quantum computers are really expensive, and this is not what AI needs right now. And to be honest with you, a lot of AI practitioners have struggled to put their workloads onto quantum computers, but quantum computers are really good for certain kinds of scenarios. I feel like we should hold our fire on that a little bit until we get to your quantum story, because you actually have a news item about that here. Yeah. But I would expect a different consortium to coalesce around quantum. The one thing about quantum I'll say right now is that a lot of quantum use cases, and Sam, the reason why I think you were losing some or hair last night, like trying to figure out when is this coming, is because it's going to come as part of hybrid architectures at first. It's not going to be a pure quantum architecture, and so that's why there's some gray area in terms of like this vendor says this many years, this vendor says right now.
Yeah, could not agree more.
Also, the products that have used the UA Link standard haven't been made yet, so this is for the future. Right?
Yeah. True.
Right. There's a lot of different technologies, and so I'm looping one into this, which maybe I shouldn't have, but I think there's a parallel. That's why I brought it up.
Oh, but, yeah. Going back, it's going to need the same standards as this one. So
yeah, no question.
Yeah. So Sam, I think going back to your question, does this change the data center model? Is really what you were asking, and so what's your thought, Sam? Is it?
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting. I mean, there are a lot of changes in the data center market right now just because of AI. And I don't know if this particular story is going to be driver for that. I was just wondering if there are going to be any changes. I don't have as much background, and that's why I was counting on you guys.
Yep. Michael, any thoughts on your end?
From a data center perspective, I mean, I think we're still struggling with how we keep up with power requirements and all of the, increased needs as more and more companies get involved in using AI, that sort of thing. So I'm not honestly sure that I have a good feel for where that's going to go, because there are too many other connected issues around that, right? So how do you get the right energy to the right place at the right time? Where are we going to build these? How are we going to keep them cool? I mean, there's all sorts of complications that AI has added to the data center load as we go forward.
Yeah, I think sustainability is a big topic, because if there's an advanced amount of electricity and energy that's needed, water, et cetera, I think that there's sustainability issues that need to be adhered to. So I think that we're going to see that as a pretty prevalent topic. When I talk to some of the vendors, who are dealing with things like this, they mentioned that they have to address it internally within their application for, sustainable data. And then externally, how do they not use so much, resources that they're wasting it? So I think that that's a big component of this, and I think companies will be looking for how to solve that as well. And it's not a big topic, but it should be, or it's not talked about as much as it should be. Okay. Anything else on this slide before we keep on going?
Nope.
Okay. Well, speak of the devil, we got a little quantum computing here, and Christian Klein says that that it's not today. It's kind of on the forefront, and but we see competitors that are making it more of a topic of today. That that they do see quantum computing as a huge impact, but like John, you said, it's expensive, and Michael as well. How do we put it all together where it fits into the bucket? But I think it's a huge component for the drug companies and engineering and crypto and all the different complicated types of tasks that need to be done. That this really is a big part of that. But does the cost justify the ROI?
I mean, this is an early conversation too, right? I mean, we talk about it, and we've been talking about quantum for a while, but we're still kind of at that theoretical, just now moving to more practical experimentation. So it's early. There's some really compelling use cases, as you mentioned, Robert. I mean, the idea of drug discovery, pharma, healthcare, diagnostics. There's a lot of things, but I don't think we really know, 3 to 5 years, 2 to 3 years, 1 to 8. Roll the dice. I don't know.
But why not advance it for things like pharma? Why not? We're spending huge amount of money in those sectors, and I think the drug companies are winning and not the patients necessarily. So why not advance it for those use cases in that area to move things forward a little bit?
I mean, that's where you're seeing experimentation, right? That there is experimentation around those areas, because those are the highest value use cases. So I think we're not that far away from seeing some very specific applications. I just think we're a ways away from, broad impact of quantum computing on the enterprise kind of a discussion.
So a few things to point out as well. I agree with what's been said. I think one really helpful way to think about quantum is not, I think some people think, oh, this is the evolution of computing, whereas in fact, it's going to be a resource for certain types of use cases that really aren't well suited for the technology we have now. And Christian Klein in this points out one of them, which is supply chain scenario planning. Some of that stuff is so elaborate that typical computing structures, even high performance computers, can't quite handle it. And the thing that's interesting about quantum is you're welcome to a whole another set of pros and cons and a whole new set of buzzwords, including things like are you ready for superposition? And are you ready for entanglement? And in addition to the expense, let me read this real quick, which is from Photonics Online. On the downside, quantum computers are highly susceptible to errors due to decoherence and noise. So, and currently have a limited number of qubits, which is the other big phrase that we're going to be talking about. So now we have another error-prone technology to reckon with, which is not to say that it doesn't have value. It's just that quantum is going to have a specific way it can be used. And again, I think the way we're going to see it is through these hybrid architectures where we find a way to utilize it for exactly what it's good for and mitigate the downsides.
I think I wish we were living in a world where all technology will be used for good. I was talking to another vendor last week, and they were talking about how even like Face ID is now, there are a lot of technology that's available that can actually penetrate it using your Face ID, using AI and everything else. So imagine the downside of this falling into evil hands, right? Like, I don't know what security will mean in the quantum computing era, but it's exciting to hear that one day you'll be able to do a lot of work just on a laptop that you have because you have access to quantum computing. But probably we are many years away instead of
Well, Shashi, I do want to point out real quick that you've raised a really important point, which is one of the unfortunate quantum computing use cases is decrypting very complex and supposedly secure, ultra secure security standards. So there's a lot of hand wringing around that aspect of it, and if that technology falls into the wrong hands at the wrong time. So part of getting ready for quantum computing, unfortunately, is getting ready for the security threats and impacts of that.
Yeah. Yep. Good point.
Yeah. So when I was looking at this story, I was a little confused, and I don't know whether you guys felt the same or not. So initially, I was thinking that maybe Christian Klein is agreeing with Google that quantum is going to be in the next 3-4 years. But when I was reading the commentary, it felt like 10-15 years. So I don't know, whether there was a problem with the story or with me. But seems like he is saying that it's probably going to be in 10-15 years, right, guys?
No, he says we see quantum not in 10 to 15 years, but certainly in 3 to 4 years. He's actually trying to push you back from that that broad prediction down to the one that they're Google's and others are saying 3 to 4.
So Google and SAP are agreeing that 3-4 years we are going to have a quantum PC here.
Yep.
Yeah. If not sooner.
Yeah, I need to check warranty on my laptop right now. I need to plan for that.
Yes, you should.
I have a question for you all. Like, I think Google has a lot of technology that it's not willing to part with very quickly till it's really sure that hey, everybody else has it now, so let's open up our doors. Do you think that's theory is true?
I mean, the theory that Google has more technology than they've released, I don't think that's a theory. I think that's a proven fact. But, but now what it is, I have no idea.
Yeah.
Now Microsoft released a quantum chip just recently. So, I mean, I don't think it's 3 or 4 years. I think it's a lot sooner. But
the problem's underneath, right? It sounds good, quantum chips and hardware and this sort of things, but how do you get the qubit? How do you get enough qubits, and how do you keep those qubits stable in an inert gas? And I mean, it's very complex once you go below the covers, and we're still trying to sort some of those things out. But as far as specialty applications for quantum, I think we're already starting to see those emerge. So I don't know. I'm not really one of those guys. I don't really like that it's going to happen in 3 years or 5 or 10 or 18. I don't know. I have no idea. It's in progress, right? It's a continuum, not an event.
That is a very good position.
One thing I will say about quantum is I'm more bullish on quantum than I was on blockchain. Like, well, I was a little bullish on blockchain for about a minute. After talking with Ray Wang long time ago, but this was like early days. But as soon as I really peeled under the layers and looked at the technology, I felt the technology had some inherent limitations. I don't feel that way about quantum. I think the technology will come into play, and I'm particularly fingers crossed around healthcare because I think it's going to be able to help us with some really challenging problems around things with human genomes and stuff that are extraordinarily complex. And I think there's going to be some really exciting stuff to come out of that. So I'm not going to poo-poo that. But like Michael said, like, what does this mean in terms of time frame? I really think we have to really stay laser focused right now on helping customers in the moment with all the intractable problems that they have. So I do think it's coming, but I don't know. I wouldn't be like too excited about like, oh, 3 to 4 years. Like, who knows?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good exercise for researchers right now, and have at it. I'm happy that they're there, and I know that we're going to get some value out of it over time. But in the meantime, you're right. There are too many other problems trying to come into the enterprise to worry about quantum computing at that level.
All right. Any closing thoughts on this discussion before we go to the next slide?
No.
So, Robert, we have some comments here. I don't know if you want to touch on those first before we go to the next
one. Why don't you? Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, let's do the comments. So we have a lot from.
Shout out to Tony.
Yeah.
hey, Tony. Sorry, we didn't get to all your comments. But nice to see you.
Hey, Tony.
All right. So go ahead, Sam. You want to lead these?
Yeah. Let me change the view first. So hold on. Oh, no, not this one. Okay. I always mess that up. So hopefully this one is better. Okay. Okay. So Tony is saying the challenge is in the situational awareness when companies operate with siloed technologies. I mean, that is always going to be a problem.
Yeah.
I mean, if you have ERP, I don't know how many people are going to use it. So siloed technologies are always going to be there, I guess.
I mean, you have to fix the data layer underneath. That's still the issue, right? Yeah. Silo in tech really ends up in siloed data, which ends up being a siloed problem, and you got to solve that.
Well, I think also to modernize that company is a big benefit, because then once you get off the on-prem and all these different locations, you're modernized. I know that's it's a dream for everybody, but I think it's a reality that needs to happen.
Just real quick on this one, because I know Tony's got a bunch of questions, so we should try to answer all of them maybe. But I'm more optimistic about getting rid of data silos than the culture silos, and they're not the same. Yep. So we're getting better and better at conquering the data silos over time if we really want to. It's getting people to work together in new ways that is the really interesting challenge here.
Good point.
Fair point.
Yeah, so we have some more. He's saying especially if agents have autonomy.
I think that might have been a response to my point around Epicor and just being precise about how the terminology is used around how autonomous agents are and stuff. And this is a really potent discussion. We could spend the rest of the show, frankly, on this one comment. So.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Perfect. So I'll keep going here. Okay, so have you seen a demo that has impressed you? So I don't know if that is the Epicor Prism one. If that is the case, then yes, there is demo available. If you guys want, I may be able to find. I don't know. I cannot promise. It's always hard.
We can put that in the show notes or something.
Maybe you ought to send put the link in the show notes.
Okay, so some more comments here. So Finland has multiple data center projects going because of stable infrastructure. What is that? Infrastructure and low cost energy, national competitive advantage.
It's also
we have a slide coming up
there, right?
Go ahead, Sashi.
I think we have a slide coming up on data center energy use, but I think Tony was talking about the Apple slide that we had, about the data center chips and standards.
Okay, perfect. So I'll move to the next story if you guys want.
Great.
This is the one.
What a fall.
Yeah. So Sam, this might be something a little bit in your neck of the woods, because it's from Toronto, and but I'm not terribly familiar with the founders of this and how the troubles that have happened since the pandemic. But maybe you all have some better insights on this.
Yeah, so happy to provide some background. And Ritual was one of the hottest, startup technology here from Toronto, and all of these, I would say, food delivery app. Once upon a time, I guess they were really hot. I don't know if their buzz is gone because of AI. That's a possibility. Or pandemic. I don't know if that has been a factor. I think they were growing during that time, if I remember correctly. They have companies' revenue declined sharply falling from $50 million, which is probably nothing in 2019, to $3.9 million in mid 2024. So that's a sharp drop. So I guess, I mean, the startup is just gone, to be completely honest. That's the crux of the story. Shopify acquired their assets, but there's nothing. I mean, Ritual is gone.
It's just probably the customer base. I mean, that's what they're buying. What other assets do they have?
So,
Well,
I thought they were still for. I thought they were still for sale based on the article that I read. Of course, I don't. I mean, you're local. You probably know better than I do. But it seemed to me like it was the opposite story for them, right? They were doing food delivery downtown, and then everybody went home and wasn't downtown anymore, and that's when their revenue dropped, and they just never recovered from that massive change from 50 to 3.
So the founders got a nice soft landing. So kudos to them. I wonder if the investors feel the same way. Sam, there was a telling comment. Sam, let me just read this to you and see what you think. By 2019, Ritual was used by more than 10,000 restaurants in 50 cities, serving millions of customers in dense urban zones, typically within walking distance of offices. What sounds wrong to you about walking distance of offices in 2019? Pandemic times, obviously, right? Like their whole business model was set up, without the contingency of how life could change on a dime. And to be fair to them, I don't think this is a good test, of whether a lot of this was viable or not. I mean, obviously, like, a DoorDash is almost becoming a verb where I live. Like, so obviously the concepts that they were trying to build a business model around were not wrong, but they just didn't have that flexibility. And, Starbucks ran into some of the same problems, but the thing is that Starbucks wasn't as dependent on office traffic, and so Starbucks could shift and rethink some of their strategies around how consumer behavior was changing. Ritual had no way to do that, so they were screwed.
Yeah. I mean, it sort of reminds me of internet bubble stories, right? There was this delivery I can't think of the name, but the delivery company that was centered in a few big cities that would deliver anything to your office. All you had to do is just tell them what they wanted. They go to the restaurant, pick it up. They go pick up a book for you. They do anything. And then when everything blew up, there wasn't, all these startup offices to get people to call for delivery. So they went out of business. I mean, it's a typical I focused in the wrong place story.
It's also bad timing, right? I think I've actually, over the last 2 weeks, I've been talking to startups which have been affected by the post-pandemic, meaning people who really saw a lot of business with like virtual event management and everything else. And after the pandemic, things kept coming down. I think it's how quickly do you react when the market changes? I mean, like you said, DoorDash. I mean, fast food delivery hasn't gone down. In fact, it's actually gone up because we are so used to comfortably sitting. Restaurant carryouts are actually their main business nowadays, more than people visiting them. I wonder if these people could have shifted from the office worker that they mentioned here to giving the other apps a run for their money, right?
I guess we'll never know.
And I don't know if there were any sort of pricing challenges in pivoting to that. There could be a possibility. But sometimes, I don't know. I mean, why they would not pivot, because you are right that residential one is probably doing okay. But these guys could not sustain, or maybe just too much competition, I guess. I mean, there's a possibility.
Sam, is it exclusive to the Canadian area, or is it an American company as well?
Ritual?
Yeah.
My understanding is that Ritual is focusing primarily locally.
Okay. Maybe this is one of those situations when they, not selling at the right time as well. So. Anyway.
And the restaurant partnership, the majority of these startups that we have, I guess they are fairly local and regional in nature, the way their partnerships are set up. So I don't know how scalable was for them to go after any of the US restaurants. But generally, from my experience, the restaurant startups that we have seen that, okay, I'm going to onboard 10,000 restaurants. How do you do that? You go door to door, talk to every single restaurant, and you try to bring them in, because they are probably not going to be on LinkedIn, I guess.
Well, there's just big money behind their competition. That's all.
Yeah.
But okay, we got time for one more, or where we want to wrap up? What do you think, Sam?
We can do one more. I don't know if there's going to be a short story, and then we can do. So this one I guess is probably going to get a lot more comments. So this is related to ThoughtSpot. This is a very similar AI story, not AI, BI story, I guess. So in this particular case, they have launched the studio. And again, I don't know, I mean, whether you guys are going to have any more comments here on this one. But for the most part, what is the future of number one BI companies? Are they going to, I don't know if I want to use word survive, but there is going to be a little competition with the AI interaction model in my mind. So this is very interesting story. I think ThoughtSpot is doing really good. They have always been the leader, I would say, in the BI market. I don't know if they are leader in market share, but they have been very innovative in general.
I mean, more and more, this is being democratized and put in the hands of all your employees, right? That's what you want. You want data at the point of use, so I can, naturally query that sort of thing. And it does seem like in this announcement, they did say that there were business user capabilities in this as well. So maybe that's the key to how that's going to move forward.
So, Sam, I thought you nailed it in your salty commentary here. Self-service analytics has always been a pipe dream. Analyst Studio has finally made it a reality, and you say looks good on paper, but how true would this be? And that's what we have to see. But I think you're right that BI vendors, if they just stick with the top level of serving up insights, they could be threatened, right? Because there's going to be a lot of ways to interact with systems and get those insights going forward. But it looks to me like announcements like this show a vendor like ThoughtSpot that I think is worth following, that they're trying to think about all the plumbing in the back end and how everything it takes to deliver those quote unquote insights. And so I think that's the way forward, right? Is to, they're using all these trendy vendors like Snowflake, BigQuery, and Databricks to try to solve, the sort of real-time data problems and things like that. So I think that's the right direction. One really interesting thing to note here is it will be generally available. It's now generally available as an add-on option to cloud customers. And I think that's interesting as far as like how so much of this, when we see it rolled out, seems to focus first on cloud environments. And I think that's an interesting wake-up call for customers, because when I did a back-of-the-envelope calculation, I think about 20% of ThoughtSpot customers are cloud at this moment. That's just a back of the envelope, so I could be a little bit wrong there. But anyway, like it's just interesting how that is a big shift around BI, because a lot of times historically BI was on premise, and so much of the future I think is going to be about these cloud environments.
Yeah, I think they're part of the value chain, Sam, for getting data ready for AI. I think right now it works, but we'll have to see how they move forward with their partners and what the customers need.
Yeah, and personally, I do see some value here, because I guess from the AI perspective, one of the layers that is not going to be there is probably data engineers. So now business users may be able to do a lot of that heavy lifting. So that's where I see a lot of value with something like this. Yeah.
Yeah, because you don't want companies to have to build up huge data science teams to enjoy this stuff and to get something out of it. And I think that's the trend we're seeing.
There's also less friction with this product, right? You're not necessarily pulling out any of the bridges that you already have, and you're just adding it on a layer on top of what you have.
Yeah. Robert, so just 1 minute, I guess, so we need to probably close.
Let's wrap up. This was a great, episode. I think everybody contributed really well. I think we had a lot of great subjects. And why don't we go with some closing thoughts, go through the whole group here one at a time. What are your closing thoughts to this, and what do you foresee happening on the horizon for you going forward? Any advice to the audience? Why don't we start with Michael?
Sure. Well, in talking to several companies recently about how they're trying to roll out AI and what problems they've had as they've kind of gone through this process, one of the things that I really think we make this mistake a lot, and almost any time we roll out new technology, right? It's not just technology. It's this big transformation enabler in your business. So, if the executives that are building the strategy, you have to think beyond IT and beyond the tech and start to think about, how do I get AI embedded in use cases that add real value as I go through these different proof of concept into production. So I think, we're at the point of a lot of business transformation. And if you want to win, you've got to really lean in and look at those use cases and be very intentional about the way you go forward with this, not just from the tech, but from the business change that you're going to see from it.
Great. John, what about yourself?
Well, this was really good for me because I get really impatient looking at these press releases and I get annoyed. But it's really cool to deconstruct them with the group because I don't get as grouchy, and I think this is really good for customers because this is exactly how you should think about this news, is have that same kind of dialogue internally and with your trusted experts that we had today. And I really agree with Michael too, because like these days, like software is really good. It's going to get better, but it's good enough that it puts a spotlight elsewhere, right? And it's all about data, culture, process, and AI doesn't fix that. Like AI accelerates companies that are doing that stuff well. It can kind of make things worse for companies that aren't doing that. So it's a really interesting point in the industry because for a long time the software wasn't good enough. I don't think that's a problem anymore.
Shashi?
I think a very philosophical last thing is like, for enterprises, don't be arrogant. Somebody is definitely trying to do something that your business model is going to change. And for entrepreneurs and startups, the advice is, even if the market is established, you can still disrupt it.
Sam, I'll go and then turn it over to you. I think it's building on what Michael said. I think all companies are not created equal, and all industries are not created equal. You have to choose a technology stack that works best for you to take advantage of AI and get your data in order. So I think it's super important. I think that's one of the big gaps that's not identified, is that people, put everything in one bucket and think it's going to work. But every company has a different innovation aptitude, and then you have industry and resources and change management. So I think there's a little bit of a hill there, but the goal is to get there to take advantage of the AI world. So Sam, turn over to you in the close.
Yeah, thank you so much, guys. And I think Ritual Story is the reminder that why analyst matters, and you should be talking to them. Just get feedback from the market. It's really critical. You don't want to be there. On that note, thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. If you joined for the first time, this was Analyst Gone Wild. We meet every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern. I'll see you next week.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the WBS Podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform so you never miss an episode. For more information on growth strategies for SMBs using ERP and digital transformation, check out our community at WBS.rocks. We'll see you next time.